Welcome to Pro Audio Profiles. I'm Brennan Decora, and on this show, we focus on techniques for inspired studio performances. Each week, I host experts from across the industry. Let's get started. On today's show, we have John Pratt. He's a musician, composer, and producer with credits on TV shows like High Stakes Poker, Rock Stars, Journey for Artists, and the film Park, among many more. Enjoy. First and foremost, I want to thank you for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Brent.
Awesome. I'd like to start, if you could kind of go over your backstory, kind of how you got to where you are.
Sure.
What led you to music, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Young kid, 7, 8 years old, people figured out I could sing. And so I was brought down to family parties and sang with my dad playing the piano and that kind of thing. And went through my whole early years just loving singing. Mm-hmm. And then I started hearing music and growing up in San Francisco in 1967, hearing a lot of really amazing artists. And I was an infant, but still it was permeating. And I wanted to be Lenny Pickett, the saxophonist. And then I went out and priced my first used saxophone at 13 years old and said, oh, well, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So anyways, I kept singing, and then through high school got into bands and got into a good high school band with a great music teacher, Robert Clevin. And he inspired me greatly to move forward with it. And my family wasn't really encouraging. They were skeptical, to say the least, and it really wasn't part of their format. So I definitely set out on my own. I came to LA in 1979 with everything in the trunk of my Chevelle and one phone number.
Okay. And
planted a flag. Started singing in bands within a year and a half. Some okay, some amazing. And the final band that I was in was a band called Roxbury Drive that was a big band locally in L.A., and we had a good run for about 3 years, selling out a lot of Roxy, the Whiskey Country Club, all that, Troubadour. I can't even tell you how many times I played that club.
Nice.
And it was great. It was great, but life was moving forward, and I wasn't making anything close to a reasonable existence. So I decided to go back and approach it in a different way. And as a singer, theory was never in my wheelhouse. I never was trained anything. I did have the advantage of working when the band was successful, working with a very famous, working with a great vocal coach. And he taught me a lot, and I studied with him for about 7 years.
Okay.
And also another vocal coach as well. And but in 1987, I realized that the best thing to do was to figure out a way to make money doing what I loved.
Right.
And so I went back to school. I took extension courses at UCLA, and I studied under a gentleman named Don Ray. Okay. Don Ray was this amazing teacher that you get that takes every student out once for lunch and says, "Who the hell are you?" Right. And then you sit there and I was already scoring TV shows. I'd already gotten a couple of trailers and stuff. And I mean, I had people around me that were very talented that were making sure that I didn't totally screw up. Yeah. But it still was one of those things where you were always, it was bated breath. You were always nervous. You were always worried you're going to get, you're not a theory guy? You didn't go to Berkeley? You don't, Juilliard what? And, so.
You can't read this music.
Right. And, and I scratched my way through it. I figured out, how to do notation and stuff like that. And, but moving forward, I studied with Don Ray for a year, and I went into TV film head first. Okay. And I partnered up with a brilliant pianist named Michael Alamania. I know you know Michael. Yeah. And he's my brother. And we had a company we built called Cinemuse. It lasted 23 years. Nice. After 23 years of writing together, it's time to move on, and we're still brothers from another mother. We work together constantly. He's on my newest album, and been on all my albums, and I should say our albums. And Michael taught me a great deal. He taught me so much about discipline, about performance, about I could go on and on.
Yeah.
So he and I developed this company, and we, as I mentioned earlier, we wrote, I want to say, close to 90 songs for the television phenomenon known as the Movie of the Week. Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and it was on every channel, CBS, NBC, ABC.
Right.
And we didn't work for the networks, we worked for the production companies that put them out.
Right.
And Michael and I wrote, and I was the cheapest guy in the room, so I sang on 70 of them. And then another great singer, Angela Alamania, sang, Michael's sister-in-law, beautiful voice, sang on most of the female songs, female voice songs. And we had a good run with it. And we also wrote pretty much, I don't know, ESPN, Fox Sports, so much beach-oriented sports, volleyball, skateboarding, snowboarding, everything extreme. We did all of that during the 80s and the early 90s, and it was a blast. And we did it in a place called Level Brook Recorders.
Okay.
And Level Brook Recorders was a studio that I acquired in 1990, and it was on it's on Sunset Boulevard. It no longer exists, sadly, because it was owned at that time by EMI.
Okay.
And EMI moved up the street to 8750. We were at 8800, and in the Carolco building. And Carolco was a film company and very successful. And they closed their doors 6 years into my being there.
Right.
And when they closed their doors, the building changed hands. They didn't want a studio in there, but it was a beautiful build out.
Yeah.
And we did, Michael and I hung our shingle there, and we did all our TV film there.
Okay.
And 2-inch room, old school.
Yeah.
I still have the piano,
nice.
but everything else is gone.
Yeah.
And I also learned how to build studios by taking that one apart. I ended up buying it from Carolco after the second year.
Nice.
And 4 walls in, obviously, it's in an industrial office building. And then when they moved out and the leases were readjusted, I just said, I'm going to take the whole thing. And I learned how to build traps and walls and floating floors and, and that's not what I do, right?
Yeah,
so,
you just figured it out.
But I'm, struggling musician. So I get a new space. Well, I can't afford anyone to build it, so I'm going to build it. So I build it. And this room we're in right now, I built that too. And moving forward, Michael and I, our careers kept moving forward, and we decided that it was time to dissolve, and we did. And he's very successful. And we actually both now work for Michael Ajitzi's company, Diamond Mine Productions. And we create, along with dozens of other writers, a lot of the music for the CBS catalog, the Viacom catalog, the Telepictures catalog, and I think Paramount Television now as well.
Okay.
So that's kind of what I do now. I still make records.
Right.
All through that period of when I got into TV and film, I stopped singing. So I sang I had a 14-year singing career, and I literally put it on hold. And then I got involved with this charity group called The Tribe, and the next thing you know, I'm singing again.
Yeah.
So, and that's been great because they've given me these great songs, like be able to sing Bohemian Rhapsody and Carry On Wayward Son, with a string quartet and full band and 2,000 people in front of you. That's great. It's fun.
Nice.
But it's also singing other people's stuff.
Right.
And that sort of leads me into what I do now. And I've created a new project called Highlands Jam. And Highlands Jam is an artist-forward platform that is designed to bring known and unknown artists into the film and television publishing world while keeping every right they deserve. So we offer recording services and video services for their promotion and for this brand, if you will's promotion.
Right.
But they own all their publishing. They own all their writers. And when we do these recordings, it costs them nothing.
Right.
We do share the master. And that's the only thing we share. And that's the point. We want this to be a licensing transaction, not a perpetuity transaction.
Right.
It should be an individual moment.
Do you help, just to get clarity on that, do you
I've talked a lot now, so I'm just
no,
trying
that's fine. With Highlands Jam, do you help them with any of their other catalog or only the stuff they do in your studio?
As it stands right now, we haven't devised a way to include them in the platform when it's something that's entirely owned by them or other people.
Okay.
It's awkward.
Yeah.
To put it mildly,
Just with the legal
in
issues
every
and all
sense,
that. Yeah.
logistically to
Of course.
contractually. So what we do now is we create a we've created a platform, and we use the Disco server, if you will, to bring it all. And where when you hear our artists or these artists on our platform, the first thing you realize that this is not source cue. This is not built for. This is not Vibe-like. This is stuff that people are saying and doing because this is their emotion. This is their soul.
Right.
And we've been unbelievably fortunate to capture so many of these moments here on this channel. We have 32 artists that have signed up with us so far, and we have 120 videos in the collection.
Okay.
And it's a team of people who really believe in this cause, Lucas Farring and Janie Thorne, and it's unique.
Right.
Is it going to work? We'll see.
Yeah.
But
good.
we've really done. If, as I said to you before, if someone told me 18 months ago that I was going to be doing this, I would have laughed myself silly.
Right.
But no, we are, and we're
Yeah.
actually getting things done. People
Nice.
get it.
Nice.
So the first part is just creating the product, and as you know, with any library, it's volume as much as it is content.
Right.
Because you want to make sure people know they have options when they get there. So considering these are all feature performances,
Right.
that's a pretty big catalog to start off with.
Right.
And so we've also created a episodic, and it's called Highlands Jam. And quick plug, highlandsjam.live is where you'll find us, or highlandsjam.net, and you'll find us on YouTube, Instagram, Threads,
Right.
all of it.
Cool.
So the purpose of all this is to give the artist this platform, and also the ability to control their destiny intellectually, and for the catalog's rights.
For sure.
They're
For sure.
individuals. And we want to make sure the transaction is fair, and they, as I said, keep their publishing and their writers. That's usually the first thing you surrender when you try to get a placement. We don't think that's the way it should go. We think it should be transactional.
Right.
We think that it's referred to as a needle drop in my industry, as the actual physical contact of attaching it to the film or the visual element. And we think that from our perspective, if we can make a really fast transactional experience for music supervisors and directors and producers, as well as an honest delivery of an artist's product so that they are compensated as they should be. And obviously we can't do this for nothing, but what we're asking is a modicum.
Of course.
And so I've been doing this for so long. I've seen so much disparity in everything, down from cue sheets down to the interpretation of what my percentages are, and the split outs of publishing and writers as they've evolved over the years.
Right.
You know, from the 50-50 from the 100-100 to the 50-50 equations that, you know, because when you told someone that you had 100% of a writer share, but that's only 50% of the total share, and all of a sudden they've got to get into this, and so you want to make this simple. And you want to make it honest, and if it's simple, it will be honest, right? I mean, it's just so if you look at our contract that we have with each one of our artists, it basically states everything I've said. If you go to our website, it states what I've said. We're trying to build a better mousetrap for everybody, so that directors, producers, and independent supervisors, music supervisors can come in and find what they want, find that song that makes that scene, makes that opening, and they're here.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I know I played them for you, and it's solid stuff. We have some amazing artists, and really, I it's a combination of that and also having the understanding of its value.
Right. I just want to take a quick break and tell you about my free guide, The Art Method, the Advanced Recording Toolkit. In it, I share the details of how you can get pro studio results from your home studio. I've believed for a long time that it's the cooking, not the kitchen. If you can learn some of the advanced methods for getting great results in the studio, you can do it in any studio. I skip the basics and dive into the more nuanced info you need to level up the quality of your home studio recordings. Check it out now at brendandecora.com/art. And now, back to the show. Now, you've worn a lot of hats across your career. So when it comes to like when you're actually composing and writing for film and TV, what is your role in that? Are you the singer? Are you the writer? Are you performing? What are you doing for that?
I'm all of it.
You're all of it.
I'm all of it. And if it's required.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I've been location music supervisor. I've been singers on soundtracks. I've been the full composer, producer, sadly mixer on soundtracks. You know, when you're an independent guy like me, it gives, and you hustle, it gives you the ability to find that spot, right? To find that spot where you fit. And then if you know how to exploit it, and that's a horrible word, but it's really the only one appropriate.
For sure.
You take advantage of it. And so I've been really lucky because I only know a few singers out there like me who started out like me, and how wonderful that they're doing so beautifully.
Right. Oh, good.
But I'm still really, I like my process, and I understand my process, and that's really, I think, something every composer, when they get comfortable, that's sort of the gist. I know what and it's not a question of my wheelhouse because in writing for Diamond Mine Productions and CBS, I've written everything. And I mean, not far extremes into my styles, but I've written a lot of different stuff, and it gives you that experience where you get to expand and you get to listen. And so, we got a friend at the door who wants to come in and say hi.
Doggy.
So we have dogs here at the studio. This is Chloe and Dalton, and they basically are our mascots. And she's going to come sit on your lap.
That's okay. That's all right.
So the best part about all this, I think, is for me, the Highlands Jam thing is the personal growth. I think when I met you 15 years ago, 17 years ago, I was very myopic. My music was my music. I didn't listen to too much music. I didn't go to shows. And that might have been part of the fact that I kind of quit singing and wasn't really thrust in that environment anymore. And so I ended up really, and also the liability thing too. I didn't want to listen to things. I was at a place where I was getting unsolicited material sent to me anonymously 3-4 times a week, and it was just like I just put them in a box. Never opened them. You know, I didn't want to send them back. I just never opened them. And because of the way my mind works musically, I'm always conscious of the fact that I don't want to subconsciously invade someone else's artistic space.
Well, that's you know, one of the things I like to talk about a lot on the show is kind of how to be inspired in the studio as the artist, and how to inspire the artist if you're producing them or that kind of thing. And obviously, you know, someone like you've worn all the hats. So how do you find inspiration when you're stuck in the technical side of things or trying to record yourself or that kind of thing?
It's non-chronological.
Okay.
So sometimes it starts with the inspiration, and sometimes you think you started it with the inspiration and you get into the technical and you're like, I can do that to the inspiration. Wait, let's go back to the inspiration. And I thrive on the emotive quest. So I value everything that I've done as far as financially consequential to me, as far as musically, has always been attached to a visual element. Okay. So I sang for years, sold out everything. Nothing in my pocket. And had fun, but my life was moving fast. You know, and in those days, if you were 25 and you hadn't hit the mark, you were a little long in the tooth. And so by that time, I decided that, you know what, I'm going to find out what it is that makes me tick. And it was always connecting that emotive coil. To know that One of the best reviews I ever got was someone who made fun of the way I looked, but said, "So what? He emotes. This kid emotes." And I thought to myself, "That's the best review I'll ever have because they figured me out." Mm-hmm. And that's really, as a singer,
right?
Singer artist, you come forward as unvarnished and vulnerable,
right?
And you come forward that way, and as long as you remember what that feels like, then you know how to put that into music, into a scene. You know, you connect with that emotion when someone's going through that in that moment,
right?
And it pulls it out of you. And I can't really explain it because, maybe that's where the theory part leaves me.
Right.
But I prefer to think of it as this sort of metaphysical thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it just sort of feels like it's that tingle. You know it when it happens.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, holy cow, what the heck
exactly.
just... And then you just, and it's like...
You can't stop.
Like, you can't stop, but also, too, you quest for it every time.
Right.
You want this to be part of your dynamic so that everything has a relevance. Right? You don't want to do... At this point in my career, I don't really want to do things that are just for the sake of doing it unless I know that I feel I'm adding to it.
Right.
And so
how does it vary when you're doing Highlands Jams? You're producing those artists. You have a space here where you not only record them, but you're filming. It's quite an elaborate film setup. Like, how do you make them feel comfortable and find their passion?
That's a great question.
Under all that pressure.
I've had artists walk in who have said to me in the first sentence, "I need you to know I don't trust producers. I don't like studios. I don't like..." And I've walked out saying, "This was the best recording experience of my life."
Nice.
And that's it.
That's the goal.
That's it. I mean, and here's the thing, going back to the whole thing about where I was myopic and I didn't listen to anyone else's music. Fast forward to this moment here, 14 months ago when we had or 13 months ago when we had our first recordings here with Steve Postel and Rob Bonfiglio. And I mean, these artists who wear it on their sleeve.
Right.
They're just such emotive, resonant performers. And all of a sudden it just, again, like I told you about the epiphany with Alice Howe and Freebo when they did the first video here.
Right.
Suddenly I didn't care about my music.
Yeah.
Suddenly it was like, wow, I'm witnessing.
Yeah.
I'm seeing and praying that I don't miss it, right? It's like we get one shot to catch this and you don't want it. And so, thank God there's this young man, Lucas Faring, working with me who is instrumental to making this all sound the way it does.
Right.
He's a Grammy Award winning engineer like yourself, and he is brilliant, and he gets it.
Yeah.
And he is a conduit for a lot of the artists here, as I am, and a few other people. And we have artists in every direction and every background. And this is what's important here. And I often say this is the credo here is that you have two rules. You have to be great and you can't be a dick. I mean, because that's who we are. We're here to elevate. We're not here. Dalton is agreeing. We're here to elevate. And it's important that, that this still is here around. Everything is so marginalized, whether it's in the return, whether it's in the production, whether it's in the elevation of an artist. No one gets a sophomore album anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody gets an album.
Nobody gets an album.
I mean, basically, it's 1957, and we'll throw 40 singles against the wall, see which one hits, and they'll, we'll spend some money on you. But we'll own you.
Right. Yeah.
And that word doesn't happen here.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is designed to possibly change things. And we have smarter people than me think this is a good thing. So I'm encouraged. Either that or I didn't explain it correctly. But we are at a place now where I feel that, if I can keep bringing these artists to this platform and slowly we're building up, I think I mentioned since we started the episodes, we now have we're on our 7th episode every Sunday night at 5 p.m. There's my plug. On YouTube. Highlands Jam releases 6 performances. And they're stellar. They're,
nice.
They're great. So,
Right.
Dalt.
Okay.
I have a fan. As long as I give him treats, he's always got my
Yes,
back.
of course.
But
When it comes to collaboration in the industry, obviously it's crucial. Can you discuss a collaboration that influenced your work or opened new creative paths for you?
wow, they all do.
Right.
I mean, they all do. I've worked with so many unique individual artists from every background.
Mm-hmm.
They all give you something,
Right.
and it's up to you to go, is this something I can connect to or not?
Right.
And
Right.
and I think the most important thing is the honesty of knowing when you can't, right? Especially because you're in this realm, everything costs.
Yeah.
So, you need to be honest with someone and say, I'm not the right guy, or I am the right guy, or you're not the right person. And that's fine, because that's just life.
Yeah.
Just be nice. And
Exactly.
that's again, going back to don't be a dick.
Yes,
it's kind
don't be a dick.
that's the kind of the
Moral of the
lowest
story.
common denominator
Yes,
around here.
exactly.
And so we, collaboration is really important. It's been really hard during the pandemic
Right.
to work with people, just because as much as I like the whole technology part and we
Yeah.
can get so much accomplished on two different
Right.
coasts and all that stuff,
Right.
there's nothing like sitting in a room with someone
Yes.
and just going, "Whoa,
Yeah.
did you just feel that?"
Yeah.
And that was
that's the exact reason I like to do these in person instead of
Right.
over.
No,
the
and I
internet.
get it.
Absolutely.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
It's the connective tissue, right? It's the stuff because music is becoming so technical,
Right.
and I think that's where Highlands Jam is sort of beating the odds. If you walk in here, it's that unplugged thing.
Yes.
But it is full band,
Right.
and we don't know how far we can go,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's
Well, I wanted to ask you actually, like you mentioned there's genres and all different styles and types of music. Has there been any like pop productions where it's more electronic stuff or?
no, and we're waiting for it.
Okay.
I mean, it has to fit into the format. It has
Gotcha.
to be something where it's visually, and now again too, if it's like obviously a DJ is pre-recorded, and I
Right.
mean, we're going for something more spontaneous,
Right.
And that to me is where you really capture that
Right. Right.
golden hour moment
Yeah,
kind of thing, where it's like,
exactly.
whoa, and we've caught them. I mean, we Janie here, Janie Thorne, who's sitting here with me off camera, and Lucas, and we've all sat there and caught these moments where we go, did you just feel that?
Right,
Did you just?
right.
What was that? That was
Exactly.
amazing. And we sit there and we're bewildered because
Right.
we just it's our dumb luck that we and again, as I say, all we do is hope that. God, did we get it?
Yeah.
Did all the cameras work? Did the
Nothing crashed.
and
exactly.
and sadly we did have a moment of that once, and it's
Right.
been relegated. But still,
Yeah.
we need to be as competent and ready as these artists coming in and giving and spilling their souls.
Right.
So
Right.
the least we can do is show up and capture.
Right.
So
Exactly. And how has your music evolved over the years and changes in technology influenced
well,
it?
I grew up. I grew up with on 4-track cassette players.
Right.
I mean, because getting into a studio when I was in my teens
Yeah.
was a monumental expense. Where you'd go and spend thousands of dollars in a day, and the
Right.
first 2 hours of watching some guy with a tweaking pencil
Yes.
getting tones on your 2-inch tape going, when are we getting started? And you just
Right.
paid $500 for the
Jeez.
privilege of just aligning your tape.
Jeez.
I realized then that I was just going to have to figure this out.
Right.
So I went from a 4-track Fostex to a 6-track Fostex to a 6-track Tascam
Yeah.
to a what was it called? I think it was called the 788. It was an 8-track open reel, one-piece Tascam unit that was brilliant.
Nice.
It actually could record 8 inputs simultaneously.
Okay.
And so that was the game changer for me.
Right,
Everything
right.
else was layering, and
Yeah.
it's a cassette. And so by
Yeah.
the time you got to 20 tracks, Dalton, he knows.
Right.
By the time you got to 20 tracks, you were like, that's lovely hiss.
Yeah.
Where's the music?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so I was always putting that into my equation. I was like, how am I going to?
Right.
Because I had all these ideas, and I had a piano. I didn't have anything to multi-track. I didn't have electronic drums. I didn't have
Right.
all of those things that composers used as tools to take to a studio and then have players perform it.
Work up the demo.
Exactly. And so, cost effectiveness was basically whatever worked. And so 388 was a Tascam 388.
Okay.
And then moving forward from that, I got the opportunity to, by getting some work and some good fortune, to rent a real studio.
Okay.
And that was a learning curve like nothing I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
On every level.
Of course.
From technology to babysitting.
Yeah.
To collecting.
Right.
But my clients in the beginning were mostly EMI clients, and it was nice and friendly, and everything worked efficiently. And I had the good fortune of a landlord that made sure all the gear that I was renting worked perfectly.
Right.
And in such a way that I ended up buying it from him because they were tired of paying for it, but it was already fixed.
There you go.
And so that was as I said earlier about the studio thing. And we sat there, Michael and I, back in those days, trying to lock picture to film, and picture to music. And back then, half the time there was no budget to rent a link system, and no one could afford one.
Yeah.
And they were also very finicky.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
And so, I mean, I can't tell you how many times we danced 2 tracks side by side just trying to get things to lock.
Jeez.
And and we did everything on a JH24 2-inch machine and an AMEC Angela console, which back in the day was malaligned because it had a routing nightmare issue, and now is much coveted, oddly, as channel strip.
Okay.
Yeah, and but we had a 28 input AMEC Angela, and this was all like learning Greek or Latin to me.
Right.
I mean, I'm walking into this, and I'm barely hanging on to the life with Digital Performer, and now I've got to learn, studio equations.
Yeah.
And we had everything old school: Crest amps, white EQs, Meyer 833 monitors.
Yeah.
Everything was vintage before it was vintage.
Right. Exactly.
And it was great because it sounded great. The room sounded fantastic. It was tuned room. It was beautiful. And it, as I said, taught me how to build.
Right. And then how did that evolve into building
that's
your
just
own
it. And
your
next
own
thing
studios?
we get, back in the day, you could go to NAMM and get endorsements right there on the floor.
Right. Okay.
And Mike and I walked down there, and I guess I talked my way into an endorsement with Mackie.
Okay.
And so we got one of the first D8Bs.
Nice.
And it arrived DOA.
Jeez.
And this is how I knew this was a great company. I don't work with them anymore, but this was our experience then. The D8B arrived DOA. I phoned our representative up there because there's emails was hardly a process. And I said, hey, we start a show in 2 days. On Saturday, we start posting this music, and your board's DOA.
Right.
They put a guy in a truck and a board and had a new board to us in 12 hours.
Dang.
And they're in Oregon or Washington.
Nice.
They're thousands of miles away.
Yeah.
And I was just sold. So we did a lot of stuff on D8Bs in the beginning. It was an easy platform to get into. You could really keep up with, not the big boys, but you could keep up for 10K.
Yeah, no, those things changed the industry. Absolutely.
And you had auto location.
Yeah,
you had memory. You had the things, if you were doing production that you needed to have fast recall, you could get away with.
Yeah.
And with the Digital Performer, between the two of them, you could get a lot accomplished. And remember, DP back then, I think was 4 tracks of digital audio.
Wow.
Right. So, and getting into Pro Tools for 8 tracks was tens and tens of thousands of dollars.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So everything was daunting.
Right.
We did everything on. We didn't do the D8s. We did the D88s.
Yes.
You remember those?
Those
I think.
are better than
we had
anyway.
4 of those.
Yeah.
And all synced together, and it brought us up to the level we needed to compete.
Right. Right.
So that was great. And then moving forward from that, suddenly I was thrust into Pro Tools, and that was a learning curve. Even though there was many similarities in notation editing to all the platforms I'd used before, but it still was really difficult to get in that curve.
Right.
And especially because a Pro Tools educator back then privately was like 120 an hour.
Right.
So I was very fortunate to have people like you and Chad Carlisle and other great engineers walk me through it and teach me a lot. And like everything I did from the moment I figured out how I could possibly play music, I paid attention.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the key.
Nice. Nice.
When I was in all those bands, when I was in my teens and early 20s, when they went out for a beer or smoke on their break, I sat on somebody's instrument and flailed miserably. But and they'd walk in, they'd be, and I'd be like, but I got to know.
Yeah.
Right? And now I play, I only hire musicians when I have a budget. So obviously I have to do it all myself.
Yeah.
And it's invigorating and thrilling and rewarding and frustrating.
Well, that's the idea. It's like you're constantly learning, you know.
But that's the best part about all of it, right? Because if this didn't light your fire, then what the heck are you doing here?
Exactly.
So I mean,
you're in the wrong business.
And I've taken on so many quixotic events in my career based on music and based on hopes and dreams, and I'll keep doing them.
Right.
Because that's your soul.
Yeah.
Right? That's I know you and I know how you move through this and everything, you know, engineers are looked at as this technical thing. No.
Right.
No. No.
Not at all.
Engineers are the conduit between your emotive concerns and the true delivery of those emotive concerns.
Exactly.
So you can't do that without also sharing those emotive concerns. As an impresario / novice in this realm, because I know enough to know enough.
Right.
But I know enough also to know when it's time to call in someone like you and say, hey, here we go.
Exactly.
And so on the independent stuff, it's been a wonderful tool. It's kept budgets in check and delivered good product. It's also given me the ability to feel better about stepping into multi roles in a production. And as I said, I've done location supervising with live bands. I mean,
everything.
So it's wearing the hats is important. Knowing which one's your favorite is also important.
Exactly.
So
nice.
I and it's interesting this whole thing Highlands Jam that I keep referring back to. That is the new. You go through these phases in your career where something elates you and it carries you, right? You know, you did that album and you said, I can sleep for the next 10 years knowing I did this record, or I can die, or God forbid, or you know, all those things.
Yeah.
You need those moments to support your relevance.
Right.
You need those moments to teach you that. Constantly, because you got to always keep learning. If the moment you close the door to that, and that's the best part about this site, is that every time someone walks in, I'm floored.
Right.
I mean, and for so many different reasons, either their ability to immerse themselves in their art in front of a total stranger, in front of cameras, in one take.
Yeah.
You know, the pressure's enormous. And a lot of the artists, when they first came in, they thought we were just like an iPhone and a couple of mics in a Porta studio. And no, we recognize the value here. We recognize that this is important.
For sure.
And we need to have, we need to be honest.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we get it.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
I know I keep talking about Highlands Jam, but it is my thing right now. I'm still obviously writing music for a lot of different vehicles.
Definitely.
And I have an album coming out as well.
Awesome.
But I do find that Highlands Jam has really become, to me, the most rewarding thing I've done musically in quite some time. And the best part about it is selflessly I can say, I'm just a witness.
Right.
And it still feels it still gives me that same high, if you will, of creating something on my own. It's just that I got to be part of that, and that teaches me something too about filmmaking.
Yes.
Because when I watch when I get films, when I get elements here to cut to, it's got code. It's it's raw. It's
there's graphics missing.
It's a puzzle,
exactly.
right? And the only way I I did go to acting school. I have a degree, if you will. And scratch that. I don't think they called that a degree. I don't think it was accredited.
Okay.
But I was a graduate of the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Okay.
And I only did it to be a better singer, to be a better frontman. I wanted to connect the dots. I wanted to be emotive. Right. And that's, I think I mentioned earlier, that guy that mentioned in the review that he emotes. That's why that resonated so heavily.
Right.
And I think when you sit on that side of the equation and you understand method and delivery and moment and beats and timing, especially in things like comedy equations musically.
Right.
I mean, that's but actually every musical equation, knowing when just that simple presence of whatever element musically is all it takes to pull out every emotion out of the audience.
Of course.
Is to me, that's the brilliant stuff. I mean, I love overtures and massive scores, and I live for it. And I've only been attached to a few 70-piece projects, and those are like, they get to come back tomorrow and I'm going home kind of things. And they're still great.
Yeah.
They're still they're extraordinarily uplifting.
Awesome.
But when you're working with an independent director and he says, I've only got this, and you go, okay, how am I going to connect these dots?
Yeah.
And then so you go, okay, I know a cellist.
Right.
And I got a pianist. And I have a guitarist, and I might have a brilliant percussionist.
Right.
And I fortunately, I have all of those. And these are all my friends and people that I work with in Continuum. And when you have those tools in your kit bag, if you will,
right,
the strength you get. Sorry, not someone's backing up the street.
Okay.
The strength you get, though, from those tools, timing is everything. That's also another part of it. But the strength you get from knowing that I want to hear this cello note, and I want to hear it in this weep. I mean, I want it to cry. And you have someone that knows exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Then
it makes it easy.
Then you can climb mountains.
Yeah.
And especially guys like me who, who didn't have the book in front of him for the first 15 years of his life.
Right.
And
for sure. Nice. I like to wrap up each podcast with
I'm so sorry that I talk so much. You barely asked me anything.
That's totally fine.
I'm like, Janie's like, yeah, John's, what is this, 5 cups of coffee now?
Oh, good.
And I guess since we are going to say it, little promotional plug, Highlands Jam. Anyways.
Oh, good.
No, but please, I'm sorry.
So I like to wrap up with the same, just a couple questions each time. The first one is, who is your most influential teacher?
Well, I mentioned Robert Clevin, and he was inspirational on a number of levels. He gave me confidence. He believed in me, and he was a giver.
Right.
And I mentioned Don Ray, and he was brilliant, and he understood that someone like me had a shot.
Yeah.
And I mentioned Michael Alemania.
Of course.
And as my brother, as a brilliant artist, as a brilliant composer, pianist, he inspires me on so many levels as a human as well as an artist. And I would say that those three are in a tie for the upper tier. But I would have to say that the inspiration I get is, I don't know.
Right.
It's something greater than me. And I won't put a religion to it, and I won't put a faith to it. I will just say that it is divine to me.
Right.
And it is my barometer. It's sort of our business model here, is how we try to make sure that we are doing things the right way.
Right.
And it's also the way, you walk your walk.
Right.
You try to do the best you can. And I always say, don't be a dick. I do my best. And no one's perfect. But as long as you keep striving for it, that's all you can do. But going back to all of this, I would say that my wife and my son, my wife Bridget, my son Justin, and my parents, who are both brilliant musicians and not professional. They did it because it was something they
for
did.
the love of it, yeah.
My mom was a pianist. My late father, was a brilliant classical organist.
Okay.
I used to turn the pages for him as he'd play Bach's Fugue in D minor.
Nice.
And of course, he'd have to nod his head. I wouldn't know where he was.
Right.
But I'd turn the pages and he'd be on 4 tiers and 3 pedals and just crazy.
Right. Nice.
And
Nice.
and my grandfather, my mother's father, was also an artist industrialist, and he taught me amazing things. And maybe this is a fun story to leave you with. When I was a young man, and when you first met me, my hair was down to my middle of my back.
Right.
And I was always singing in bands and had earrings and, the game and the show, and we all had the look. And I didn't do the makeup thing, but it was everything else.
Yeah.
And coming home from LA one time, and my parents and my mother's parents were home at the house in San Francisco, and my parents had it. I was like, just such a disappointment because it was,
Right.
going to be a rock star, Dad. Oh, what is that? And sure enough, you get into this huge argument, and I walk out into the living room, and I sit down on the couch, and there's my grandfather with the newspaper over his head, sleeping on the chair side to me. And I'm sure I'm carrying on. And suddenly the newspaper slides down, and he says, "Johnny boy." I said, "Yes, Grandpa." He says, "If they want you to put bow ties on your ears and it sells records, you put bow ties on your ears." And the newspaper went back up.
Okay.
And I got to say, that was for me, that was pivotal. But for my parents, the person that really had the most influence on them was Boz Scaggs.
Okay.
My father was an educator in San Francisco, and Boz's kids went to my dad's school. And my dad gave Boz my first real demo tape, produced by Mark Spiro down here at Juniper Studios.
Okay.
Bo Tomlin played the keys on it. I mean, it was Denny Gore played the keys on it. I mean, it was a real deal with Roxbury
Right,
Drive,
right.
Chris Meyer, Gary Barnes, Rob Sullivan, great band. And my dad gave it to Boz Scaggs with this one question: "Is there any hope?" So obviously he wasn't too impressed.
Yeah.
But Boz Scaggs wrote a 3-page letter to my parents.
Okay.
And just said, to sum it up, "Is there any hope? You ask me if there's any hope. Hope has nothing to do with this equation.
Right.
What you should understand is the disappointment your son and every artist feels every time they put their art forward and face the possibility of rejection." And that resonated with my parents. And so they ended up coming to my shows.
Yeah.
And flying down and being a part of my career.
Nice.
And so when you say what was the single inspiration, I'm really lucky
Right.
that I don't have just one.
Yeah.
Right.
Of course.
I have you. You taught me Pro Tools. You taught me
Yeah.
so many things about engineering. Ryan Green, my goodness, another brilliant engineer. He'll say I got him started in the business, and technically I did, but he did it all on his own.
Yeah.
Surrounding yourself with people who are like-minded, who persevere. That's really the word in this industry.
Right.
Is you got to just stick it out.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's
Yeah.
so hard. And there's so many times when I look back at my career and it's like, how did I get through that?
Right.
And you just try to be as forthcoming as you can
Right.
with what you can deliver. You don't. You never. What's the saying? You never over.
Oh yeah.
I forget what it is. Sorry.
Over.
Janie. What
What
is
is
it?
it?
Over.
Promise and
And
under
deliver. Right.
Under-deliver,
Something
yes.
to that. There we go. Well, that's obviously going to get cut.
Yes.
But
No.
but you surround yourself, and so I'll leave you with this last thing, and it goes back to Highlands Jam. Dan Navarro is someone who I think is a brilliant singer-songwriter troubadour, and he and I have sung together on Steve Postel stuff. We've sung together live with David Crosby in performance as with Janie here and on the Tribe, and he has some very notable authorships to his credit. One is a Pat Benatar hit.
Okay.
And Dan has done something that I think every one of us has thought of at one point or another. And he said, I'm going to get a Sprinter van and I'm going around the country and I'm going to go do my stuff.
Yeah.
And he does. And he does it really well. But one of the greatest things about Dan, and I talked to him about it after I saw it, he has a podcast like you. And it's about just what he does. like you. And it was sort of welcome to being a musician. And the first thing he says is, congratulations. And I thought it was kind of trite, but it wasn't. And he turns it into, now what are you going to do?
Right.
And the most evocative thing, profound thing that he said to me in that next few sentences, and there was plenty of stuff after that, but the most important thing he said to me in those next few sentences, build your community. Mm-hmm. And as you know, it's a tight circle.
Right.
And you got to stay in the game. Mm-hmm. And back in the day, it used to be, gosh, you're going out on tour. Great.
Yeah.
I hope they don't forget me when I come back.
Right.
And that was often the case. We'd have a great guitar player. And back in the day, guitar players, of course, were the much coveted instrumentalist in the 80s for anything. Yeah. And there's always a solo on everything. And you'd have a great guitarist working with you for 5 years.
Yeah.
Put him in on everything. Put him in on the writers on everything because he's a piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. And he earns it. And he says, yeah, I'm going on the road with so-and-so and I'll be gone for 16 months or 8 months or 4 months. Mm-hmm. And you still got to create. Yeah. You've still got to work. And then the next guy comes in or the next person comes in and kills it.
Right.
And they do all those things that the last person was, and now they've been with you 7 months. Mm-hmm. And your friend comes back and says, hey, I'm back in town. And you're like, that's great. I have this new guy.
Yeah.
And so that was the curse of touring back then. I'm not sure what it's like now.
Yeah.
I don't, it's not my game. But back then, that was the curse of touring. And so when you found that community of multi-instrumentalists, and probably the greatest one I know is a gentleman named John Thomas. And John Thomas, as you know, has played on pretty much everything I've ever done that required a guitar. Mm-hmm. And he is Juilliard, or in Berkeley, I believe. I'm sorry, John, if I get that wrong, but I know he is extremely theory trained. Mm-hmm. But he's also prolific on guitar, piano, and drums. So basically, he's that guy you could say, I need to make a record. What are you doing for the next 2 weeks? And that's the only person you need in the room.
Right.
And you'll get it. I mean, and so
okay.
Going back to the inspiration stuff, these names keep coming out of my woodwork, so to speak. Yeah. And I was like, oh God, I can't forget him. I can't forget her. And
we could be here all day.
They are, I could be here because at this point in my life, I've had so much influence on me from so many great, talented people. Yeah. And you just got to you can't never not be a sponge. You can't ever let yourself dry out, right? You can't, God, what a great metaphor. You can't let yourself dry out because you don't, again, Highlands Jam opened my mind. It created a new horizon.
Right.
And you suddenly realize that this is bigger than you. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, and that's also the charity gigs. Janie can tell you, I think, as well as I, that when we do these charity shows, the sense of elation of accomplishment, and this group has raised a significant amount of money for LA homeless, millions, and we've been a part of it for a long time, and as many other great LA musicians, and also international and local musicians and national, whoever wants, it's sort of a band of people that go around and if someone needs money, we'll go get it for you. Right. Kind of thing. Right. Whether it's Ukraine Aid or Water for Haiti or the fires. I believe we did the fires too, and of course homeless. Mm-hmm. And that's Kevin Wax's vision, and it's beautiful. Yeah. And so many people are part of that organization. Again, the word. Community. Exactly. You no man is an island, right? That's an interesting phrase, but it's actually true, and it doesn't mean obviously men. It means anyone. Right. And we are so insulatory these days. Mm-hmm. The pandemic, the stress, the life, politics, religion, social, everything. You have to find a safe place. Yeah. You have to find a place where you can go and say, I need to defrag. Right. I need to just lower the pressure, and hopefully we've accomplished that here. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I know that just the simple art of making music, or act of making music, you hope it's art, does that.
Right.
for me.
Right.
So to give anyone the ability, I know that's Chloe panting in the background. She's being petted by Brandon. For those of you who don't see that, and of course she's happy. Anyways,
Well, I had a few other questions
I
to wrap
know.
up.
God, keep going.
But you've already answered them, honestly.
Really?
You've already
I'm a
answered all the
talkaholic,
questions. So I want to thank you so much for
Brandon,
being here.
my pleasure.
Absolutely.
I'm so okay. And just the final kudo to you. I'm so impressed with you. I've known you now for a long time, and our paths don't cross as much as they should.
Right.
And when you called me about this, and I went on your website, and Lucas and I looked at it, and we were just like, "Holy cow!" And and I knew you'd been doing great things.
Thank you.
Good news gets around.
Right on.
And again, community. And
Cool. Awesome.
and I'm really honored to be on this. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining in today on Pro Audio Profiles. Make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next week.